Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Reality Check Podcast. Tonight's topic, the Gaza peace plan. This is a issue that has been very much on the forefront. It is an issue that is to date still unresolved. And of course, the ball is in the court of one side, that being Hamas. And before we hear from them, we're not going to really know how this thing plays out. But there's a lot to cover. There are 20 points that were outlined in this peace plan by Israel. I'm going to pass it over to Raul, who's going to take over and go over these points, and then we will discuss them.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, the plan, which apparently has been agreed to by a lot of the Arab countries, with the exception, of course, of Iran. But I think Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Jordan, Egypt, even Turkey, places, a number of countries have sort of supported the plan. I'm sure they got a lot of arm twisting from the president and from others that have a vested interest in getting this done. But the peace plan, requires certain things to happen for it to move forward, right? It's as Carlos alluded to, it's got 20 different points. The first is that Gaza will become a de-radicalized, terror-free zone that poses no threat to its neighbors. That's the objective. It is focused on, number two, the redevelopment of Gaza for the benefit of its people, focusing on infrastructure and humanitarian needs. The third point calls for an immediate ceasefire if both sides agree, with Israeli forces withdrawing to prepare for hostage release. So the Israelis, once there's a cessation of hostilities, they will then withdraw from the current lines that they are at, right? So number four entails the return of all hostages, alive and deceased, within 72 hours of Israel's acceptance of a ceasefire. A prisoner exchange. Israel will release 250 life sentence prisoners and 1,700 Gazans detained after October 7th, 2023. Amnesty for Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and disarmament, and safe passage for those that simply wish to leave Gaza and are unwilling to commit to peaceful coexistence and disarmament. Full humanitarian aid to be sent to Gaza immediately upon agreement. That's number 7. Aid distribution to be managed by neutral international organizations, including the UN and the Red Crescent. And I think the language is written in such a way that the existing aid organization that's being run by the US and a few other countries can also participate in that, because nobody really trusts the UN. Temporary governance to be done by some technocratic Palestinian committee, which excludes Hamas, of course. There is to be no Israeli annexation of Gaza. The territory remains under Palestinian administration. Number 11 was one that I sort of found rather curious. It's the creation of a board of peace to oversee Gaza's transition, including figures like Tony Blair. So, Tony Blair is being dusted off and suited up again and being sent in to, be involved in this board of peace. And Trump, I believe, is the chairman of the board of peace as well. So he's going to be involved in this. Rehabilitation of infrastructure. The infrastructure will basically be rebuilt: water, electricity, sewage, hospitals, road clearance, all that stuff. The opening of the Rafah crossing in both directions under agreed mechanisms. Rafah crossing is one of the crossings into Gaza. The destruction of Hamas infrastructure above and below ground to be monitored by independent observers. No rebuilding whatsoever of Hamas facilities. Reconstruction will exclude militant assets. Hamas is excluded from future governance of Gaza. Humanitarian aid and territory transfer will proceed even if Hamas rejects the deal. An international stabilization force to be led by Arab partners will take over Gaza security during transition. The pathway to Palestinian self-determination and eventual statehood is recognized. And number 20, reforms by the Palestinian Authority itself, including elections and ending payments to families of terrorists. The Palestinian Authority, has long had this policy that basically they continue to support the family of martyrs, terrorists that have died in terrorist acts, and that is always been a very sore point to the Israeli government. The fact that they're living side by side with Palestinians, and every time one of these terrorists kills a bunch of Israelis, the Palestinian Authority makes sure that his family is taken care of for the rest of their lives. That is also why you see the Israelis oftentimes when these things happen. The Israelis will go into, if they control the area, and they'll actually bulldoze the terrorist home to the ground, to send a signal to the others, don't do this. But of course, family members are no longer in the house, and they're receiving compensation from the Palestinian Authority. That's it. Those are the 20 points.
Well, what are the odds that we think any of those will be approved by Hamas? I mean, if you look at that, if I'm a Hamas terrorist, God help me, I see that as heads I lose, tails you win. Just my take on it.
Yeah,
Well,
look, obviously, it's 20 points and a lot of information there. I mean, I'm sort of with you. I'm a skeptic. I think talk is cheap, and I'm of the belief that these guys, we can't think of them as rational actors. I mean, these people
Yeah.
they're just evil. They have this cult of death. I don't think they want to they want to go out. They all want to become martyrs, right? How do you do that?
Marcus.
uh, I would loosely call it a plan or an agreement. It's more like my way or the highway. And the thing is, for it to be like an accord or a treaty, it has to be bilateral. And and when there's like the threat where if you don't respond in 72 hours, I'm just going to let Israel go to town. Legally, for international purposes, for Hamas or the Palestinians to agree to it, it won't be legally recognized under threat of coercion. So I'm just talking on a legal sense. It's based on Article 52 of the Vienna Convention of Law and Treaties of 1969. A treaty is void if the conclusion has been procured by threat of or use of force in violation of principles of international law. Okay, I'm not pro Hamas. I'm just saying, as a third person view, that this is just like a first step in the process, but having a 72-hour timetable kind of cheapens the point of it, unless it's Trump is using it as a negotiation tactic. I don't like one party decisions when you don't have the other party represented. And I think that other groups, I think like Qatar and a few other Arab countries, wanted to add more points to it to keep it more neutral. And like I said, I don't like one party where you exclude the other party. I look at the Paris Peace Accords, where U.S. and North Vietnam went to a peace accord minus South Vietnam, and then South Vietnam, after the peace accords, were like, "You sold us out. What the hell happened here?" And I see the same thing as the Doha Accords, where the U.S. made an agreement with the Taliban outside of the Afghan government, where they were forced to release 5,000 prisoners, which were pretty much used as frontline troops against the government. So, not just my first thoughts. I'm going to step back.
Allison, you want to chime in on any of what's been discussed so far?
Oh, was that for me?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I apologize. Yeah.
What's your
Well, my first take was when Raul had just returned from his trip to Israel, and we dedicated a podcast to that. it was my opinion, and I think Raul's impression as well. I asked him if that was the consensus in Israel after the October 7th attack on Israel. My own personal feeling was that that was the end of the two-state solution. Period. Like we would finally put that in the ground forever. So I was wrong, but I'm surprised. I thought after the atrocities that Hamas committed, that after 75 years of everyone talking about a two-state solution, and at every juncture the Palestinians have said, no, we want war instead, I figured this is finally the last straw. So to me, it's kind of a real Hail Mary pass to incorporate a two-state solution into these agreements. I just don't think you can negotiate hatred away. And as far as strong arming, Hamas they've got no hand to play here. I mean, they're getting creamed, and I think what they're being offered a life raft as an alternative to extinction. So they can either agree to this, or they can be hunted down to the last man. Whether that accords with international law, I don't think Israel really cares anymore. This is an existential battle for them. The more I read, and I keep rereading about the actual events, in particular of October 7th, the harder it is for me to give any sympathy toward the Palestinian side anymore. It was just so awful. It was. You consider our reaction after 9/11. I think that's what Israel is dead set on this never happening again. It's also interesting, Marcus, you mentioned the 72-hour deadline. We know from the deadline that Trump gave Iran that he's serious when he lays down these deadlines. So if it's not met, the clock's not going to be. They're not going to go into overtime. They'll have the opportunity to accept within the time frame, and if not, then the bombers are going to start flying again.
Marcus.
Out of the 20 points, there has, like, realistically, a lot of them have to be met for possible statehood. And then one of the big issues is de-radicalization. And I look at it as a generational thing. Like like World War II, post World War II, Germany and Japan, it took over 10 years to correct their behavior, over 10 years to correct their behavior from Nazism or imperialism. Now they're, the consecutive generations, totally different class of people. And the thing is, they mentioned like security forces, Arab partners. My concern is the level of sympathy for Hamas, like a Hamas underground, to kind of work within the shadows. Like Hamas could concede, we'll do it, and they kind of like hide for a while and grow in force. So because there is a big debate, it's like PNA, the Palestinian something authority, but they're saying we don't want a lot of aid because a lot of it would be diverted for terrorist purposes. It was estimated like 100 million was diverted for tunnel work, for weapons a year, and like the security forces, like they have their own police, but what they did was they hire terrorists. They hired criminals into the police force, and they were used as suicide bombers against Israel. So my take is there's going to be some potential of undermining the whole process over time, and then it just it's just a tactical retreat for them to build up again, you know, in the worst case scenario.
Well,
And
look,
that's
and
historically that's happened time and time again ever since 1948. And I think Israel has finally said enough. You know, we've tried this over and over and over again. It's also another thing that I find problematic is that the Palestinians are supposed to somehow, once they get rid of Hamas, they're going to elect their own representative government, who, in tandem with the foreign overseers, are going to run the country. The Palestinians voted Hamas into power
yeah,
in 2006 after Israel did everything they could um, to placate them. And they held democratic elections and they chose Hamas. So, how do we choose the Palestinians who are going to vote in good faith for elected representatives who will actually take care of the people and not just, as Marcus was saying, reorganize into another hate terrorist group? Um, I don't want to be a wet blanket because I like the idea of optimism and hope and ambition for good. So one of the things that I do see promising is, in light of the Abraham Accords, I think if the other Arab nations get on board with this, and it seems that they are, then you could have an international peacekeeping force. You know, if the Saudis are really willing to put up the money, for example, for security safeguards, um, then this might have a chance of working. You know, for the past 80 years, it's always been Israel against the rest of the world around them. That's changing now. And people, except for Iran, these other border countries, they're fed up with this. You know, they want commerce, they want prosperity, they want peace. And if they can all get together uh, to help enforce this, um, the only thing that I think the United States will not accept any American boots on the ground. The other Middle Eastern countries will have to do that.
Yeah.
But there's no chance in hell that we're going to, nor should we. But I think we can provide financial support if it's legitimate. But how they find the right body of people to govern the country and administrate it fairly, properly, and justly, I don't know how they vet these people.
okay, let me weigh in with a couple of points of the things I've been hearing from all of you. Number one, I'm thinking back to Japan after World War II. We nuked them twice. They didn't know that if we could nuke them thrice or more. And we gave them a my way or the highway. And as far as I know, that's been heralded as one of the great unconditional surrenders. Second point, in the history of human endeavor and struggle, no lasting peace has ever ensued or continued without the complete, absolute, total defeat of one side to the other and its unconditional surrender, which is why we're bogged down in the Middle East and where we got bogged down in Vietnam. Thirdly, as far as Hamas, they not only chose them in '06, they still back them. And as far as yes, Israel is sick and tired of it. I think it comes down to the other day, as far as other Arab states, Netanyahu was giving a speech and a bunch of people walked out in protest. So that tells you what kind of support he's got from, I don't know if they were all from the Middle East, but clearly a lot of people got up and walked out. I
No,
think
listen,
basically this is
you're absolutely right. I mean, some of the people that walked out, for example, you know, a lot of the names that are on this proposed accord, most of them actually did walk out with Netanyahu, including Jordan. It's right next door, right? And that tells you that a lot of this, you know, is pure charade, right? I mean, um, you know, it's virtue signaling. Yes, you know, we want peace in the Middle East. You know, we, the Arab countries of the Middle East, we want, you know, a peace, lasting peace to appease who, right? Appease Donald Trump more than anybody else, right? But I think the devil's in the details. There's a lot of ambiguity in this program. And Harrison, by the way, that part about Palestinian statehood is really nothing more than kind of an aspirational statement. It does not, provide like a roadmap of, how to create this. It simply says that if the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. That's a long ways from saying, we're in favor of a Palestinian state.
Right.
From the Israeli standpoint, right? It's just like, yeah, we recognize this is their aspiration, right? And if there was a lasting peace in Gaza, then who knows? Maybe 50, 100 years from now, we could see a two-state solution. But I don't think the Israelis, like you say, they're not really thinking that that's practical anytime in the near future. I don't think they're looking at this as anything other than a last-ditch attempt to get Hamas to release the hostages before they basically just finish destroying what's left of Gaza City, which is not a great deal, and moving on, right? So
yeah, that's a really important distinction and a good one.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just never thought I would hear the word Palestinian statehood again after October 7th. But you're right. It's aspirational. It could be 20 years from now. Who knows?
It could be 100 years from now, right?
Yeah.
The other day, Netanyahu made very clear, we're next to Trump. If you guys can't, if they don't accept this, we will finish it off. We don't need you to help us. We will finish it off. I think Netanyahu was finally come to the realization you have to choose between pissing off 20 families in Israel whose loved ones are there, God help them, and to use a Latin expression, I'm going to wipe my ass with world opinion, and I'm going to exterminate these motherfuckers. And until he does that, nothing moves forward. That's just my take on it.
Well, I think. No, go ahead, Marcus.
No, go ahead.
I think that you both have brought up very apt analogies with Germany and Japan. That's why we asked for unconditional surrender. We didn't start it, but we did finish it. And those two countries had to be utterly defeated before we were able to rebuild them. MacArthur has his fans and his detractors, but he did a brilliant job of reconstructing Japan. Mm-hmm. He wrote their constitution for them. The first thing he did was have the emperor go on radio and announce to the country that he was not, in fact, divine, that he was just a regular human being. So that took all that nonsense off the table. And he said, now let's get about creating a democratic government here and a country that can prosper and get along with the rest of the world. And they have, famously. West Germany, the same thing. I think I can't believe that Trump isn't somewhere in the back of his mind thinking of the Marshall Plan when he talks about rebuilding Gaza if all these preconditions are met. So we and I'm not going to include the Soviets because they didn't reconstruct East Germany; they just occupied it. But as far as West Germany goes, we helped them become one of the economic powerhouse of Europe. So both cases, I think, if these preconditions are met, then it's got a possibility of succeeding. But I think we're all of a consensus that that's going to be a hard thing to reach.
Marcus.
Yeah, if in order to foster like a level of democracy, it'll be like a generational thing where if a population's pacified, that could be like at least 20, 30 years where a possibility of statehood, but everything has to kind of fall in place. like when I mentioned about uh, the, the difference between aid and investment, the focus should be on investment. Aid could get there's waste, there's a possibility to divert it to nefarious reasons, but when you look at investment, uh, I think the focus because Gaza doesn't really have that much. What they, I think, what Trump wants uh, the Gaza to be more like Hong Kong or like Lebanon, like the jewel of the Middle East, where it's like a center of commerce, center of finance, center of banking, to center maybe of high tech. Where if they're lacking certain uh, uh, facets to be an industrial power, and then they could go through enrichment through other means. Then the issue about de-radicalization, uh, there has to be oversight and vetting, whether it's the schools with the teachers, the curriculum, because I don't think the Israelis did that, as what Raul mentioned the last podcast. It's called pruning the grass. They let it grow and they cut the grass again. So there has to be some oversight and vetting. Same thing with like their religious school, like the madrasas, like what Egypt did. They nicked it in the butt. And in terms of like the police or security force, everyone agrees that in order for this to work, you need partnership with Arab neighbors for it to work. And if they're going to be like vetting and oversight on having a viable Palestinian police force, you know what? Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, they have very effective secret police who could vet the ones to become police officers instead of let the Palestinians do their own thing and recruit terrorists and bad guys to do their thing. So, I mean, then you get like what the board of peace where you get Tony Blair and Donald Trump. They could be like pseudo governors, but you need
Viceroys.
yeah, I think it'll be like it should be like a governorship through military, but to keep it fair, maybe have it rotational. Like you said, devil's in the details. Like Saudi Arabia would have it for 3 years, kind of governing, policing. Then you get Jordan. Then you get something to offer, maybe the foundation of stability, but a level of fairness to prevent deep-seated corruption. Because when you get like one group in charge, then you're embedding maybe some corruption. But when you kind of rotate it, it kind of facilitates that. And you get like best practices when you get another group taking over, kind of governing things and policing up the areas. So that's my take.
Marcus, I listen to you, I get the impression that the more I hear you speak and the rest of you guys as well. Look, I'm of the opinion that this is a really at the end of the day kind of a whitewash. It's virtue signaling on the part of a lot of Arab countries. I mean, think about this. Egypt, for example, has said that they're want to be part of this peace agreement. These are the same people that have kept that border Rafah closed during all this time. Barbed wire with armed police. They want nothing to do with Hamas because they're basically an extension of the Muslim Brotherhood that has brought all sorts of misery to Egypt.
That assassinated Sadat.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you're seeing here is just a peace agreement or a peace proposal that pretends to be serious. It's got 20 points. It addresses a lot of the key concerns. It's got somewhat of a timetable, but it's vague for a reason. And I think the reason it is as vague as it is because at the end of the day, I don't think that anybody expects that this will actually come to fruition, right? And when you think about Gaza, okay, to what you were, talking about, Harrison, the Marshall Plan. I mean, the Marshall Plan was a huge success because Europe, all of Europe, was basically devastated. Um, a huge population that were trying to get up off their feet. And part of the Marshall Plan was, yes, we're going to rebuild Western Europe, but all this money that we're dedicating to the Marshall Plan, and that we're going to pump into these countries, they're going to have to buy American tractors. They're going to have to buy American, food stuff. So it was really sort of recycling money back to the United States because the Europeans de facto had to buy all their stuff from the U.S. Gaza is not Western Europe, right? It's a small strip of land um, that has really no, natural resources to speak of. Um, it's they Israelis left them a bunch of greenhouses. They basically ate all the stuff that was in them and then tore them all down and ripped them all up. Um, this is just I have very, very little hope. I, from the very beginning, have been of the belief that, people keep talking about Hamas and, got to free the Gazans from Hamas. No, keep in mind, I mean, like, go back and look at the videos, look at the number of Gazan civilians that were desecrating Israeli bodies on the back of these trucks being paraded through Gaza. Okay. Um, I think probably, I'd say maybe 3/4 of the Gazan population, adult population, um, are Hamas sympathizers, and therefore, and I make very little distinction between Hamas and Hamas sympathizers. I think, yeah, there might be a small percentage that has been opposed to Hamas, and you're seeing this now because apparently there's some militia groups that have sprung up in Gaza. Vying for power, local neighborhood gangs, if you will. In some cases, they're actually being supported by the Israelis, I understand, to help them find, the hostages and stuff. But this is a completely chaotic situation and a humanitarian disaster. And I don't think it's going to be fixed anytime soon. And there's nothing in Gaza that is really attractive to international investors other than some, nice real estate on the water.
I just like to add, I think that's a very good point. And I have to, we have to be so careful nowadays not to offend sensibilities along racial grounds. So I'm just going to say that this is a cultural phenomenon. But to your point, Raul, even Winston Churchill, during the 1930s, when he was the lone voice in the wilderness cautioning against Germany, as much as he hated the Nazis, he had enormous respect for the industriousness and the discipline of the German people. As a matter of fact, he kept warning England and Europe. He goes, these are some of the smartest and most capable people in the world. You do not want them mobilized under the dictatorship of a psychopath. So to your point, the Marshall Plan worked because the German people, when they were enabled and given the chance to rebuild, they took advantage of it. Likewise with the Japanese. They both had cultures that were, let's say, amenable to that sort of thing. The Palestinians, as you pointed out, I was going to mention those greenhouses. The Israelis left them these beautiful greenhouses as a gesture of goodwill when they left Gaza. And what did they do? They just smashed them out of pure hatred. Rather than do anything productive, it was more important to express their hatred for the Jews by destroying this gift that they had given them. So I agree with you. I think that's where the analogy kind of breaks down. The other thing I wanted to ask Marcus, this idea of a sort of Palestinian police force, I haven't been keeping up on how things are going there now, but I know that our efforts to do that in Iraq were extremely difficult. To create a police force from the Iraqi people. And that's not to speak disrespectfully of the extraordinarily brave Iraqi citizens who volunteered for the police force to try to keep security in their country. But they were, as often as not, assassinated. And I remember this one graphic scene. My brother told me when he was talking about what was going well and what was going wrong over there. When he was based over there, he said there was one point where there was a street in Baghdad where there was an Iraqi police car with two Iraqi policemen inside it that had just been shot dead, and they were lying in the car dead, and the women, men, civilians, everybody was just walking past, just doing their business, doing their shopping, continuing the day without any regard for these two police officers who had been shot by insurgents. And my brother's comment was, and he was just an enlisted guy, he was no strategist, but he said, if these people don't want it bad enough, we're not going to be able to do it for them. And so that's why the notion of finding Palestinians who want to bring real peace and security and order and prosperity to their country, I don't know, that's going to take a real change in mindset and worldview.
Let me chime in on a couple of things. As far as Raul earlier mentioned about that with the Russian blockade, Egypt wanted no part of Hamas. I would extend that Egypt wanted no part of Palestinians. There is no country in the Middle East that wants a goddamn thing to do with Palestinians. They are persona non grata in their entire region. The other thing about if you impose a Marshall Plan, we're talking about Europe. Europe and Japan are cultures that worship life. Islam worships death. And radical Islam, to me, is a cancer. It cannot be cured and it can only be eradicated. And it's a hard thing to do. There's an excellent movie for any of you listening and for you gentlemen as well called The Aftermath. I was looking it up a while ago. It's with Jason Clarke and Keira Knightley. It's a movie in 2019. And what does it deal with? Exactly what we were talking about. It deals with post-World War II Germany, where the Brits came in and the Americans, and they controlled everything. And the protagonist is a man who's a widower, and he and his daughter live in this beautiful opulent house. This guy had some bucks, and he had a beautiful piano, and he was relegated to the top floor with his daughter. And this British officer comes in with his wife, that's Keira Knightley, and just takes over. And they're disrespectful as hell. They're the British version of the ugly American. They banged on the piano when they had guests. They didn't give a shit about anything. And basically, the German guy's daughter, he was humiliated, but he had no choice. She starts getting radicalized, not in the Hamas sense, but radicalized by wandering around some of what are little makeshift ghettos in Germany and meeting disaffected, like-minded, similarly affected German youths, teens, who are also been humiliated and how they want to lash out. And that was World War II Germany. Imagine that in Gaza. It would be horrendous. It would be absolutely horrendous. There's a reason that these countries are dysfunctional, and as Harrison pointed out earlier, they had a chance. Not only did they vote for Hamas in '06. When was the last elections? '06. When were the last elections? There's no democratic process. They don't give a rat's ass about that. I think the best we could hope for, and it still would be, you've got to wipe them out. When I see American GIs with these wounded warriors and the different programs cut up into pieces, destroyed, maimed, disabled for life, it is heartbreaking. I contribute to a couple of those, but it is heartrending to see those people. And I ask myself, no disrespect for your service, God bless you, and God keep you, but what did they do that? Why did they pay that price so that Mrs. Muhammad can vote for Sharia? It's bullshit.
Yeah, and by the way, Carlos, just real quick, I mean you talk about this might not even be worth the paper that it's printed on, right? But I think if you look at France, where is France right now? Basically being overrun by Muslims. The UK, the same thing, being overrun by Muslims. Okay, so of course they have to sign on to the idea of Palestinian statehood. Of course, they have to seem as if they really want this to work, because they're playing to a domestic audience. The same with some of these Arab countries that are also playing to a domestic audience. This is a window dressing, man. This is not really. I don't think they're really serious about this.
Well, you wonder if he can control the radical functions of radical jihadists in their midst, the Europeans or the police states of the affluent Arab nations. Who do you think could do a better job handling that rabble?
I don't know. I think the UK police is basically worthless from what I've been seeing lately.
They're not just ruthless, they're converting to Islam. Look at white Brits converting to Islam. And I don't see those mobs overrunning people. Do you? No, I don't see them overrunning the United Arab Emirates. I don't see them overrunning Saudi Arabia. The Saudis, by the way, Marcus, to your point earlier, have proven that they're very adept at handling those things. I mean, my God, they can take a fat guy coming to get a wedding license, they can make him disappear in a collection of uh, diplomatic pouches. I mean, it's quite a talent.
Yeah. So I just want to make a point, like the Marshall Plan. Uh, One of the other uses was to actually counter communism that was infecting all these damaged states. I mean, we're talking about Italy, we're talking about Greece, we're talking about France that were at the tipping edge of becoming communists, and the Marshall Plan was used to, show that capitalism does work. And then and going and kind of going back about ideas like how it could be workable. Like I said, it's like planting seeds on very unfallowed ground. It might work, but like I said, there has to be a lot of oversight. There has to be a lot of accountability. There has to be a lot of supervision, a lot of hands-on, and then it'll be like I said, a generational change. But going to what Raul said about whitewashing, this is just window dressing, and you know what? I agree, because if it's window dressing, if it's whitewashing, what's going to happen next? And I think this is an assumption, like Israel and well, Netanyahu and Trump, they talked about what's going to happen afterwards, and I think Trump pretty much gave them the green light, just to not holding back, because a lot of times, a lot of these countries, they need permission of one of the superpowers to do action.
Yeah.
They can't go rogue,
Right.
and just do things willy nilly, because this is about the geopolitics, how everything's a chess piece.
I think that's right. I think you're spot on, Marcus. I think that's what we're looking at here, right? This is a document that basically brings to the table all of these Arab countries that, quite frankly, as Carlos alluded to, don't really give a rat's ass about the Palestinians. They've been a pain in their side for decades. They've had to prop them up financially, pay lip service to them, send them money to keep keep them happy and keep their a certain segment of their population at home pacified. So I think this is just one big gesture on the part of countries that, at the end of the day, don't really care much for what Israel's going to do or not do, and I think they're signing that piece of paper so that they, along with Donald Trump, can say, hey, you know what? We put together a plan. We signed up for it. We were willing to go to this, extreme and send, our own forces and create this whole security. We were willing to do that stuff, and Hamas rejected it, right? Which I think is exactly what's going to happen, right? So I would be very surprised if Hamas accepts this. I mean, Qatar continues to insist that they think they can bring Hamas to the table. I don't know, man. I mean, the other day there was that guy with the big spot on his forehead, one of their senior leaders of Hamas, um, saying that, he thought all this chaos was worth it. All these lives lost were absolutely worth it. Why? Because, it has brought, quote unquote, Israel to its knees and, begging for peace. This guy's justifying. Think about what he's saying. He's like, yeah, I don't care all the people that were lost, and the fact that Gaza is been reduced to rubble. I don't care about that. It was all worth it. I mean, this guy's freaking nuts, man. He's freaking nuts, right? I mean, he's insane. Out of pride. I mean, think about the hatred that must be in that guy's soul. Okay, to look at this interviewer and basically tell him, I don't care about the fact that Gaza is destroyed. I don't care about that my organization has been practically wiped out. Okay. And I don't care if I die. Okay. This has all been worth it because we have, given a body blow to Israel. And that is all that matters to this guy. Right. The rest is bullshit. Right. So, and I think everybody sees that. I think the Europeans see it. I think the Arab states see it. Israel knows it. Okay. More better than anybody else, but they have to go through the motions, okay, to appear to be reasonable, okay, to have people, take their foot off the pedal. This incredible anti-Semitism that you're seeing even in the United Nations, in the halls of the United Nations, let alone the streets of France and the UK. The Israelis are saying, look, what do we got to lose, right? I mean, the paper, it's worth the paper that it's printed on. It's very vague, nobody's going to force a Palestinian state down our throats, not in our lifetimes. So yeah, let's sign this. Let's see if, by some miracle of miracle, Hamas says, okay, we give up, which, again, I see it as very doubtful. And then Israel can tell the rest of the world, and the rest of the world can also accept the fact that, hey, we tried. We tried to pressure Israel into this deal. We bartered with them in good faith, but you guys, didn't do what you were supposed to do. Which was simply turn over the hostages, lay down your arms, okay, and everything is forgiven. No.
Lucas, Dan,
You know what? I just had an idea, like just a weird thought about, this whitewash is just a prelude to, with a wink and nod to let Israel just go to town, just unleash. And I think this is a little bit of a collaboration, like all the Arab countries that we're representing with their intel services. They're probably feeding all the Hamas leadership where they are, because then, if Israel has a little bit of the picture, Jordan provides another picture, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, maybe Qatar, maybe more than likely not, but it gives them like a more of a 360 kaleidoscope of where to target. I'm just thinking,
yeah,
about this.
No, I think you're right, and we've been talking about precedents and analogies. I think the proposal or ultimatum that we gave Iran regarding the nuclear facilities is exactly the blueprint. I mean, it may be bullshit, but it has to be done. You have to offer a diplomatic process, even if you know it's going to fail. And as with Iran, I forget what the deadline was, but we gave them X number of days, and on X+1, we sent our B-2s into the air.
Harrison, let me ask you something, because what you're describing right now is also the situation in Ukraine, right? Trump basically, during the presidential campaign, if you recall, he famously said, hell, I'll fix that whole Ukraine thing, with a phone call to Putin before I even take the oath, right? I'm going to fix it, right? Day one, right? That was his bluster. That was, what he told, the electorate. Obviously, that hasn't happened, right? He brought Zelensky into the White House and gave him that embarrassing, shellacking, because Zelensky was, didn't bend the knee appropriately, right? Um, and now here we are, okay, going into October. So it's been a while since the president's taken office, and it's taken him maybe not so much time, but it's taken all this time for him to sort of realize, man, this guy Putin, he's just one unreasonable SOB. And you hear his comments lately. The guy's basically saying, you know what, I give up. This is not fixable. Putin's not serious about wanting peace, but he had to go, to your point, Harrison, through all those steps to try and get a peace process underway, which, by the way, everybody applauded, right? It's like, oh my God, we're at least the guy's trying to broker a peace. I think Trump is doing the same thing he tried to do with Ukraine. But I think in the case of Gaza and Israel, for him, the end result is much clearer. I think in the case of Ukraine, it's taken Trump this long to realize that Putin is not a serious negotiator, that he is vulnerable, that the Ukrainians really are putting the hurt to not just the Russian army, but also the Russian economy. Okay. And that's why you're seeing now, according to these reports, that Trump is basically saying, okay, I'm going to allow, Zelensky to, strike deeper and deeper into Russian territory. And I might even give him tomahawks, right? Cruise missiles, right? I mean, what a shift, right? What a shift from where we were last spring, where here he was scolding Zelensky, and everybody thought, oh my God, he's gonna roll over, and Putin's gonna keep the whole Donbass and everything else, and now it's completely different.
I think that it's a great point, Raul. Whether you're an advocate or a detractor, nobody doubts that Trump has an ego, and I think he feels that he can negotiate with anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it took him a while. Ideologically, I don't think he's ever been fooled by Hamas. I think he was somewhat fooled by Putin. I don't think he realized really who he was dealing with, and again, it was a little bit of hubris, thinking, "Don't worry, I can negotiate with anyone." And he's finally come around to realizing that Putin he's still a KGB man who was nicknamed Stasi for his ruthlessness, even by his peers in the KGB. The one thing that really pains me is all the lives that have been lost while it took him to come to that realization. I'm glad that he's come around, but the scale of carnage in that country is something that we Americans have a hard time even conceptualizing. So I've been pretty on board with Trump for the most part, but that's the one area where I wish he had kind of had his road to Damascus moment a little bit earlier. But I agree with you. He realizes who the good guys are, and I think Putin's in big trouble.
Lucas.
I just want to speak like at an academic level, like diplomatic etiquette. You have to give the other side like an exit strategy.
An off-ramp, famous off-ramp.
An off-ramp, just to so they're saving face. There's no shame, because then they have to justify or explain it to their own people. And you can look at like the Cuban Missile Crisis. There was like to avert a nuclear war, even though there was a naval picket around Cuba. The U.S. allowed a little bit of a berth for Russian ships to go back and forth without confrontation. Just a little bit of, because if you back something to a corner, you're going to get the opposite result of cowering. You're going to get like a pushback. So in the Falklands, Argentina said here's the demarcation line. Do not cross here with your fleet. And then the British fleet was getting closer, and they crossed over. And then Argentina said, "Well, don't cross this line." So like like diplomacy or geopolitics, it is a game of chess, but you have to allow wiggle room for yourself and for the opposing side.
But in this case, Marcus, there is practically no wiggle room for Hamas if you think about it, right? Because what are the options that Hamas has, right? Basically, you have to immediately Hamas is basically bifurcated into two different categories. The people that are willing to surrender, okay, and cooperate, well, those guys can stay, okay? But if you're not willing to give up the fight, you got to leave Gaza. You go to Turkey or whatever and live there for the rest of your life. But there isn't really an off ramp for Hamas because the 20 points basically are pretty clear that you have to surrender, you have to give up the hostages, right? That is pretty ironclad. There's really only two ways that you can continue. Only one way, right? Is to renounce, violence, give up your arms, cooperate, and maybe will allow you to stay in Palestine. If you're not willing to do that, you're going to be escorted peacefully, out of the country, leaving all your weapons behind and stuff. But we're then going to de-radicalize the whole country. This isn't really. There's not much of an off ramp for Hamas, and the whole thing, if you think about it, is geared just to this one group, Hamas, which, as was mentioned earlier, was in fact democratically elected by the people of Gaza, back in 2005, 2006, whatever, and has remained in power ever since. They are the only real, quote unquote, authority in Gaza up until, just a couple of weeks ago, I suppose. They've been the only real authority within that territory. They're the ones that are, raiding all the aid groups that are coming in the trucks and, controlling the assistance that's going to the population. They still have a certain level of control over the population. And all this is being done for a group of terrorists. That's basically what it boils down to. Okay. This isn't a legitimate, government. Does anybody really think that the health ministry of Gaza was a bunch of, doctors and nurses looking out for the welfare of the people of Gaza? No, every friggin' hospital was, a huge cache of arms and, all sorts of stuff, right? I mean, it's all just BS, man. I mean, this is one terrorist organization, bloodthirsty terrorist organization, the extreme of the extreme, and a population that by and large supports them and has supported them for a long period of time, voted them into power, and who still side with them to this day. I mean, I continue to see videos of, widowed, Gazan women saying, yeah, and I'm willing to give up my son and my daughter and everybody, all of us are willing to die for the cause. Well, fuck you, man. Just finish the job, Israel. Get rid of them.
Listen,
This is silly, and I think a lot of the Arab countries are feeling the same way. Just we need this diplomatic cover before we give you the green light. That's what it is.
There's another phrase that I love, referencing what Marcus was talking about. Giving your enemy a way out. There's a professor at the Naval War College called Sarah Payne, who's an expert on China and Japan in the 20th century. And she talks about the danger of putting your enemy on death ground, which is what Marcus was referring to. By demanding unconditional surrender, we put the Japanese and the Germans on death ground. In other words, there's not going to be a negotiated surrender. You're just going to surrender. And what we learned at Okinawa was that meant they were going to fight to the very end. And fortunately, we had the Manhattan Project. And the lesson is that if you're going to put your enemy on death ground, you better be able to defeat them. Because if you don't, it's going to be a bloodbath. What's interesting is, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on this, to kind of flip this a little bit. It's Iran and Hamas that have put Israel on death ground. Israel is facing an existential threat. These are people who will settle for nothing less than their complete eradication. But unlike World War II, they're weaker. I mean, who is Hamas to demand the eradication of Israel? That's what they've done. They've put Israel on death ground, and what Israel is going to do is.
But Harrison, think about that. That's been the case going back to 1948.
Oh, right? Exactly, and yeah, I think they've shown remarkable.
When the British Mandate came out, and we're going to split up the land and give half of it to the Arabs and give a portion to Israel, the entire Arab region said, "Fuck no!" The Israelis aren't going to get a sliver of land.
Right.
And they all joined forces against Israel. Okay, they all thought they were going to be able to push them to the ocean and away, and they failed miserably at it. Okay, then they got thrashed again. The Suez War was kind of it wasn't really a victory for either side, right?
No, well, that was Eisenhower put a stop to that.
Right. But then the 67 war, where Israel kicked ass.
Right.
The 73 war, where they almost lost, but they came back, in the fourth quarter, and they kicked royal ass again.
Yeah, but we played a big part in that.
Right, we did. We saved them, no question about it. But now you look at, there is no other military power in the Middle East, okay, certainly, and in most of the world. I mean, I would tell you that right now, Israel is the dominant military force, one of the top, dominant forces in the world. Everybody wants to go and learn from the Israelis, tactics and strategy, and how to conduct war, and how to conduct humanity. I mean, Israel is showing the world how to, win on the modern battlefield. And the Arabs can't compete. They don't have that level of sophistication, of combat experience. A lot of that sophistication comes from the fact that we give them, billions of dollars of military aid every year, which they spend on buying U.S. weaponry.
And weaponry, right.
And so they've got the latest F-35s that they've actually modified for their own purposes. Look at what they did with those F-15 fighters and how they struck Hamas in Qatar.
Yeah.
I mean, this is completely new, right? I mean, the F-15s fly out over the Red Sea. They launch ballistic missiles that go vertically up into outer space, okay, cross over Saudi Arabia, and then come from 12 o'clock high straight down and blow up the headquarters of Hamas. Who the fuck has ever seen that, right? Look at
the Rangers. Well, we did that.
Of the universe.
We did that in Iraq, but yeah, no, but that's my point, is that if you're going to put an enemy on death ground, you better be able to defeat them.
Yeah, I think.
What I meant by flipping it is weaker countries have put Israel on death ground, which makes no sense.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
because they're going to lose.
Right.
So
And my point is
that was my point.
That's been going on for a century now, practically. Well,
Yeah.
years at least, right?
No, I agree, and I think Israel has always shown remarkable restraint, because they keep trying. They keep trying with concessions and peace offerings, and they all get what they get back is death and hatred. So I'm with you 100%. One thing that's kind of interesting, and this is a side note, but it's amusing when you talk about tactics and strategy. I think Ukraine is also showing the world how to fight the next kind of war. But during Vietnam, because Israel had been so successful in the '67 war, MacV in Saigon actually invited Moshe Dayan to come and observe what was going on. And after a period of time, we asked him his advice, like, after what you've seen, do you have any advice for us on how to fight this war or how to achieve victory? And he said, yeah, fight Arabs in the desert.
Now, I just wanted to comment that earlier was asked a rhetorical question. Who the hell do the Palestinians think they are to be dictating terms? Well, there are tens of thousands of stupid fucking students in universities throughout the world, probably worst of all in America, and I would dare say in Europe, who would say that the Palestinians are on the right side of this. That's another problem where the forces of death and the worshippers of death and the purveyors of backwardness have despite all of that, they have achieved a great victory. And how so? They've done it by indoctrination, stupid fucking people. And those people can be dangerous, as we're finding out on a daily basis here in our own country, where they act out. They're full of lies, but there's no convincing them that those are lies, and they'll die on they'll die on that hill that is the truth. And as far as Putin's been jerking off American presidents since what? Since W? I mean, if Trump couldn't figure that out, then maybe Trump's not as smart as he claims to be.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Bush had that very unfortunate observation that he had looked into Putin's soul, um, and but what woke Bush up, if not sooner, was when Putin invaded Georgia, and then he realized finally it was late, but he realized what he was dealing with, and Bush's even though he was a lame duck by then, his back channeling to end that was never adequately covered in the press. He does deserve credit for having put an end to that. But yeah, it's the guy. If Yeltsin had been succeeded by another leader like him, who knows how the world would look right now. But yeah, we'll that's going to be a topic for I guess our next episode. But I think we're all pretty much in consensus, right, about this proposal, and it's got to be done. That's what diplomacy has to be tried, but I don't think any of us believe it's going to. It's got much of a chance. Marcus, I'm sorry, you had your
No, it's all
hand up.
right. I think we're in agreement that this is just like a little bit of a facade where Hamas is not going to accept this. And then, like, underneath it, you get the U.S. giving the green light for Israel to go total dogs of war. And then you get like I think, if I'm reading it right or wrong, you get like an Arab coalition to help Israel to deal with it. Whether it's their intel.
Yeah.
And the thing is, one other factor of it is each of the Arab countries have to deal with their own population, where they could be pro-Hamas or not. However, they have to answer to them. So I think having this 20-point plan and Trump kind of arm wrestling some of these Arabs to have a little bit of a coalition. It just gives them a face, where we gave them a little bit of an out. They didn't follow through, even though it's not the perfect exit for them. But these Arab leaders, they have to answer to their own people.
I don't think dictatorships, those are police state monarchy dictatorships. I don't, as affluent as they are, as good as they've been about incorporating petroleum, building cities like Abu Dhabi, I don't think they're real worried about answering to their people because the poor and underprivileged in those countries, you never see them acting out. You notice that?
Well,
You never see those uprisings.
you look at the Arab Spring, at least 6 or 7 countries got overturned.
Yeah. Yes, I think there is I'm reminded of an old maxim: history takes time, and I think we are seeing a very significant change, and it started with the Abraham Accords, and one very new variable now is, as we've talked about, the Arab nations. They've experienced it's not equally distributed among society, but they have begun to become a little bit of enlightened. And there's within their population, there's the jihadists, but there are also the Reform Islam groups. And, they like prosperity, trade, economic development. They like being part of the community of nations. And if we can get the majority of Arab countries now actually working with Israel, I mean, whoever would have thought that we would see flights going from Riyadh into Tel Aviv in our lifetimes?
Yeah.
So that's what Trump got done in his first term. I think that changes everything. If we can get the Arab countries behind this, then there is an opportunity to to finally really change the world. So we can always be hopeful, but yeah, Hamas, they either need to get with the program or just that's the hill they're going to die on.
Agreed.
Yep. So we're going to be ending off pretty soon here. I'm going to go around the clock here. If you guys want to make some final observations, go ahead. I am Charlie Kirk Marcus, please.
My final observation is that every time I look in the screen myself, I find myself getting sexier and sexier every day. That's my final observation.
Duly noted. We're going to have to put some kind of a gauze or something over your screen in such a case. Harrison.
I know, man. I'm very impressed with that headset, Marcus, and the green LEDs and stuff. You look like I don't know who's that guy.
Like a gamer.
Huh?
Like
No,
a
you
gamer.
look like in Toy Story. Who's the guy? Space Command, right? What's his name?
Oh, fuck.
You know who I'm talking about.
Oh,
Yeah, I know.
Buzz Lightyear.
Buzz
Buzz
Lightyear, yeah.
Yeah.
Marcus Lightyear. There he is.
Well,
Wisdom.
Carlos, when you asked for observations, I didn't think we were allowed to state the obvious. So, Marcus, you kind of get penalized for that, right?
Yeah.
Raul.
No comments, man. My dog's got to go to the bathroom, so.
All right.
Ready to wrap
So
this up.
we're gonna be ending off. Remember, folks, if like and subscribe if you like what you're seeing, and thank you all of my fellow podcast members. A very spirited and informative topic, and really, I think the next few days will be very telling. We're going to find out who signs, who doesn't agree, what happens, and what gets done. So until then, I bid you all a good night.
It's an honor to be in